Ja, jag sa tini kat Johan kunel cheese wuchin khasati ya yaki. Ya ade awe kone ya kakanish kitiya khosaku táakwde ya ḳunahéin de arinki ni táakwde ya ḳunahéin. Keshin a le dakach satan ya washtaqaqu yikar deitsu. Ya wa adati tukhwatan data tinach sachat yati was yan khatuwane ak niyes. Ya akhiti data we yejekwane. Ya dasa we hit yi wusatach I at adaye judunein kliatke kawa us yaltakatat ఛkanhéine yach we ḳhusanéch ḥunachaya. Atina chaya tilchoa. Achoa Johan was Tlein gan wustach gach yichud. Gach yichud neo. Aga awe gedenke gach yichak. Ye awe táakwde ya ḳunahéin. Ye awe wutusaku. Wasad kakwane. Gwall yichakwa Dasa ye da ine ya yidat tak ni yis. Ari tuwasagu yan yine táakwde ya ḳunahéin.
Tlakyagi gan Xóotsx Tlein awa.
Wayach one. Dasa zu Johan.
Yetsutat play nusk hundred gallons kagan hini hit yes ḥunahéin scene.
Tu ya stakat kastu kasawasi ya yidat hujwe dan. ఛkanhéine tu ya just dana ayaki gani.
What's it do with South with Tlein yeti?
Kasatangin.
Ţaxsitangin. Ṭaxsitangin late Xhuatin yatsutat.
Yeast late away shashaki. Satangin. Okay, we kesh scene we kajuka at what did the at yisat kakwa Tlein dana gwash Costco has to cheat kakwati or Toyota hechasaku. We kajuka konacho ekashet scene yet. Like baloney dugu yacheti. And show yisa atinechateti. Okay? Ya honi shkuyel. What do it to say? Shkuyel. Shkuyel akchita watiyata. Has you katangi kashtegachtul tu ya Glossika Spanish ya Spanish you katangi. What? Yisuku Ḥukach adi Spain. Yisukuke Ḥukach adi Spain. Nakahidi theater Ḳuwdlig chak aka Spain has Ḳuwdlig. Shit the heni has to wakshiyik we ye has hours nain shkalneek. That's what's that do so? That's ḥunahéin yesh ka hin. Aqawe we klingeti ghatangi teen yukhewatan ach kak Tlein khewne do kla do eat bach Tlein you do saken klingit khinach ye waqa just the kat ya on Spain ye away gach to hein ye shukach adi Ha'ayich kuchsati ha'at u kuchsati aya yani yayitat. Ja, Jintak. Jintak has with touch. Has to jintak with the touch. Akawi kwash ha'ayi that. Chan ko'a. Wan kanins. Kwash. Just take a cook a day. Ka yi ika kwashin. Kwatu. Akakhan ḵunahéin. Wasa yak kwaka. Tlingit enach. Yisikuke. He is sick. He's in bed. Wasa yak kwaka tlingit enach.
Yannick.
Yannick.
Ta.
Ta. Kwash. ʼatudli.átk shwus ta. Ye oi katfai. The weather's warm and sunny today.
Wooch.
What
Audigan.
today?
Yagi.
Ḥuwdlig ka audigan. Ḥuwdlig ka audigan. Ya yagi. How are your parents?
Wasa yati ishka kla.
Yeah, what? Who's that man?
Adusa.
Adusa.
Adusa with ka.
Adusa weka. He's the boss. Why don't we say she's the boss?
Sati. City.
That would be one part of it.
Atshadahani away. Shaawát atshadahani.
ʻAanyalahaash would be like she's the traditional leader of the community. But like, so yes, but also, if you just want, like, let's say we're at work. And who's that? Oh, she's the boss. The work boss.
Yasatani. Yasatani.
Insitani.
Yasatani city.
Satani. I might say ʼéidáx.
Yejanech.
Those, this is gonna be hard. Those postcards are nice. How much are they? Okay, it's unfair, I think. Okay, those are, let's just say those papers are nice. How much are they? What's that? He said ʻayaa.
ḥunahéin.
Well,
Ḥuwdlig.
oh, because you travel? ʻatudli. 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 That's fine, maybe.
Kahle. Yati.
Kahle. Yeah, you can say, well, I'd probably say, just to say they are nice. Like, I guess, what are they saying? I think that your English equivalent would be to say those are good. Okay. How much are they?
Yedi agwe yedi.
Unsadana.
Kundanasa.
Undanasa.
Danasa. Okay. One more. Why are you looking at me?
Wanachsawe.
Wanachsawe.
ʼayaa.
Yes, you'd probably put the ya on there. So yeah, ʼxóotsx X.
Okay. Gosh, geez.
Okay. And you might end up with ʼayaa. ʼxóotsx X. But if you're doing it right now, ʼayaa. Yeah, ʼayaa. ʼxóotsx X. Okay. Okay. Sheesh. We'll try some of these. They're kind of fun. The idea, there's a bigger sort of conversation about that, but just sort of thinking about day-to-day sort of conversational things. I know we've talked about this in other classes before, and I'll continue to stress it, just like day-to-day types of conversation. We do have a midterm for this class. What did I say we're going to do?
Translation or transcription and translation?
Yes. So I think I know what we're going to do. So we're going to watch it now. Takes about 5 minutes, just so we can have like a good chunk of Tlingit right up at the beginning of class. I will, and then I'll walk you through a process of one option for doing transcription and translation. It's not an easy process. You have to really just have faith in yourself, understand that there's a bit of a learning curve to the whole thing. Because transcription is writing down all the Tlingit that you're hearing, and then, or transcription, yeah, and then translation is translating that into English. Everyone has their own process of doing this. I do believe it's a very helpful thing to do in your learning process. So, let me find them. There's kind of some intro stuff at the beginning. Okay, here we go. So let me share the screen and the sound. We'll just listen for about 5 minutes. Oh, wait, but I have a fun one before we do the main one. Okay, we'll do the fun one first, since it's kind of a seasonal thing, yes.
An empty skull would be the shakachago.
It the shakachago.
Empty skull.
Oh,
Shkalneek.
no brains in it.
But with all your brains and everything, it's shkalneek.
When your brains are all in there.
They were so fun to work with. Okay. This is a story called ʼaaqīt. Anyone know what ʼaaqīt is in English?
A loon?
That is correct. So let's just listen to the whole thing, and then we'll talk about the process.
Lunge.
Loon.
Lunge. Lunge.
Just loon.
Loon.
Do ʼatudli again.
That kind of joke.
Stikkat. Yeah, this thing get atna atchin. Take it ʼayaa ʼaqdu. táakwde hast du ʼayaa shkalneek. Take it ʼayaa ʻayaa ʻayaa ʻagaa ʻagaa Indaq gachtu audio kleka haan iti gden sin ayatu at ga achtuhan de gachtu saad. Toen jeda doka yadcha jego genka hin gden gane gachtu. Take a هيدا نقول أن أتخ كش ما سيكو يوند يهين دو Gachantus in. Gushimasa danage Yachakawach. The cut Yachkam Jachin. Gushimasa Gokati. Siku ʼayaa unalli. Isaada yaan daqat. At-daqat ya hini adi. Hin qatan. Jogde tu awnuk. Just yauk de tuak eti. Is tledu qawtan. Ayaqago la doqa ayaqago dert dert niada aqago doq ayaqa ayidu good to in they could in where kaqid هو عشين يقصيتك هذا أنا دقت ما سيئتي تلاقوا خشتين أخوتيني قدوخي يوداقوا كقيد كقيد إن كتشم دخج جسكين دين KSI so Master City walk Gank ḳuwdlig to do in Kacham the Hitch. Master City did. You must just walk here in Tunakoch at Khatini Khayati. Nas ka de heen te do kacham de hitch. Master City did. Master dance the cut at a teen. You sit so you yonder. Excuse. Yonder do in Yana Hoenso. Kedeen Yana San Tlankeo. That's the two yaka. You should have come to Nook. You can't goodness chase your sakai with kakait. This started cute, it just started to say, said, yeah, you said a cake am city. Clap. Kakait secha come city. Either sakaha the tea near. Kuna chee kasaka yena o chitlako. Kaya kakait say to you was said. Akasa kakait to work asane ḳunahéin kakati. Yes. ʼatudli in.
Very nice. Has anybody used a program called ELAN? I know Chifu has, and Tlein probably has.
You introduced the intermediate class to it last year. So I've at least looked at it.
Yeah, so I would like you folks to try it. If there's parts of it that doesn't work for you, don't panic. But it is extremely helpful to do this. Like, I think back to the days when they're doing this with cassette tapes and probably typewriters. My goodness. And so we're going to use the tools that we have. So the software is called ELAN, E-L-A-N. Some people say ELAN. Just whatever dialect you select is totally fine. It is software that's designed to do this type of work. And so I'll build the file for you, but I'll also show you how to do it. So this is what the program looks like when you open it. If I go File, New, it's going to ask for the media. And so the media I'm going to select is Kakrit. It likes you to do a WAV file first. There's a couple like
Are we
technical.
supposed to see something other than a blank window?
Oh, do you not see that? Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay. Does it say like selected files or anything like that?
Take.
You
There you
did.
go.
Ah.
So let's walk through that again. So we're gonna go File, New. I'm gonna choose for letting me know. So we're gonna select Add Media File, and the first thing we're gonna select is the audio. It likes this to be a WAV file, and it likes it to be in 16-bit. If you're out there editing WAV files. It's all built for you, so you don't have to do any of this stuff. But if you start working in this program on your own later, let's say you want to download some Tlingit audio and you want to work on it, this is a way to do that. So we're going to select this. We're going to add the second media file is going to be the video, which is called an MP4 file. The third thing we're going to do is add a template file. And I could put the template file on our class webpage. And so this is a template developed by Yatuteen Mallory Story. And so that it builds all the tiers for us, which there's a lot to this thing. So, and then we're going to say okay. And once we say okay, so this here, it shows you where there is audio. So you can sort of see the speech act there. And so if I hit play here, oops, I want to do it this way. I can hit, if I hold the shift key down and push the space bar. So what you do is you click and drag on a section of audio. And so now this has turned this sort of purplish kind of color. There's two tiers here. The first is called utterance. I'm going to zoom way in. And the second is called translation. So on this utterance field, that's where I'm going to type in Tlingit. The translation, that's where I'm going to type in English. So when I have something selected, I can double click it and now I can type. And I can hit, for me, I hold the shift key down and hit the space bar and I can just listen. And I can hear myself say it. And there's an awful lot to this program. Like you can, it's highly customizable. So I can say, I want the fonts. So if I'm right clicking on this, and then I'm selecting font size, and let's say 24, because that other one was way too small. But at the bigger I make the font, the more I have to zoom in to the thing, or else I might start running out of space. So then the second one is zoom, so I can now zoom in to like 300%. Then I say, and I already wrote the Tlingit, so what does that translate to?
Flashlight is green.
But just the light. ʼatudli.átk is the flashlight. So this is how this does make the work a little easier in that you can select something, you can listen to it.
ʼatudli.átk again. ʼatudli.átk again.
And then I can double click and then I can type the Tlingit. You could take whole classes on how to run this program. It's pretty convenient. You could change let's see, let me try and do here. So I think this is under options. So under options, I could select segmentation mode. And what this allows me to do is I can listen to this and hit enter, and I could get all my, this little area thing is called a segment. The thing that you type into is called a segment. So I can hit play, and then I can start hitting enter when I want the segment to start, and enter again when I want it to stop.
Stikkat ja, stikkat. Je slingit atna atchen. Kijk het hier, ʻayaa, ʻakwde. táakwde. Hast du het gaai, hast du ʻéidáx shkalneek. Kijk het hier, ʻakwde. Kijk ʻxóotsx. ʻayaa ʻéidáx ʻéidáx. Indak ʻatudli tleka ʻaanyalahaash k'dain sin ʻayaa atcha ʻaachtahan ʻatudli.átk. Dun ʻéidáx yatcha ʻéidáx ḵunahéin k'dain ʻxunahéin.
It's going to, and so this is one way to work with this program is you listen to the whole thing and you make your little marks here. And if you hold down on, for me, it's the option key. And now I can adjust those a little bit if I need to. And then I would go back to options in annotation mode and maybe go through. And now I have all of them. I could pick these like this one.
ʻxóotsx.
And so now I could enter that. And so there are times, especially if you're new to this work, you might have to listen.
ʻxóotsx.
You might have to listen to that a whole bunch of times. Now, one of the things I will tell you is some people say Tlein, some people say ʼéidáx, some people say ḥesh, and some people say tish. He's probably saying tish and tish mostly. But it's a dialect thing. I would just say write it as you're hearing it. And so if I save this, so I'm going to save this now in here. It's also called ʻqaqit. So my plan here, folks, is to give you a link right now. And that link is in the chat. Perhaps. Yeah. Now this should allow you to look into the folder where all of these things are stored. So in there, you should see the video, the MP4 file, the audio, the WAV file, and the ELAN file, which is EAF. Now, if you download all three of those, you can work in, and then you have to download the ELAN program if you don't have it already, which I could put a link for that in the chat as well. The important part, I think, is that wherever you save these on your device, you save them all in the same location. If you start having one thing somewhere else, the program will get confused. But if they're all in the same folder, doesn't matter if you got My Documents or if you've got Dropbox or Google Drive or if you, whatever, but as long as they're in the same spot. And when you do this type of work, just always be careful where your things are at. If you start having copies and it can get very confusing very fast. And so you don't have to use ELAN if you're like, that's too much for me. I don't want to learn a whole new thing while learning Tlingit. That's totally fine. I do think it's a lot easier because some of the things that you can do with this software. Oh, before I show you that, let me get the download link in the chat. Because if you work in ELAN, one of the real advantages you have, like if we go back to a different sentence, like let's just pick this one here. You say, okay, he's talking too fast for me. I just want to get this beginning part so I can highlight just a section of this. There's this sort of selections you have up here, and under controls, rate, I can slow it down. So now I can listen to it slower, and you can sort of highlight this. There's this little button here that says selection mode. And then if I hit play, I should loop. Oh, and then loop mode. Now just go slow, give yourself lots of time and breaks, and don't, like, you can sit there listening to the same phrase. Like if you're listening to 100 times in a row, maybe it's like, okay, maybe I'll move on to the next one and then I'll come back to it. As far as how I'd like you folks to do this work, this is how I'd like you to do it. So it is Naskiki Wednesday. I would like you to work on this by yourself, so not in pairs or groups or teams. And then Monday we'll check in and see how far you got. It'd be nice if we got to about 30 seconds, maybe even, let's just start there. Get to try and get to the 30-second mark with both the Tlingit and the English. On Monday, you could bring your questions. Once we get to Monday, you guys can go ahead and work on teams, collaborate if you want to. I think it'd be really helpful. I think maybe one strategy would be coordinating like some study groups maybe, or if there's someone, if you want to work with someone and just sort of bounce ideas off, work together, if scheduling works and other things, then I think that can help. Then Wednesday, I'm going to try and I'll give us the next segment. So 30 seconds is great. If you can get to a minute, rad, but let's just see how we do. Let's see how we do with this over the weekend. Your goal is to write down the Tlingit and then to translate it, and to don't go looking for the answers out there if there's a translation of this story. Don't ask for help just yet. Just see what you can do. And this doesn't mean I don't want you all to work together. I just want to see what you can do on your own before we start sort of collaborating and working together. Any questions, concerns, thoughts?
I'm wondering if we do manage to get all these links opened and the file and the program downloaded and all the little parts into it, will we be able to print off what we've worked on, or how will we be able to remember what we worked on while we're talking in class on Monday?
Yeah, well, you can just have the program open if you want to.
Okay.
If you want to, so I could show you. Okay, let me open something that I've done previously, I guess. What is kind of done? Oh, I'll show you ḳuwdlig. No, I'll show you I think we have chunks of this. Okay, so here's an example of one that some of us worked on a while back. So this is ḳuwdlig, George Davis. There's not a whole lot that's done. I guess we only got this far. It's a fitting phrase. whoever's lazy is going to start. But like if you wanted to, let's say you did work in this program and you wanted to sort of see how you're doing or see what this is starting to look like, or if you're done and you say, well, what do I do now? This program can do an awful lot, but it also requires quite a bit of sort of like manual clicking and getting through all the things. So the process of exporting something, you're going to go to File and Export As. There are two main things that I use when I use this program. I use Export as a subtitles text if I'm going to upload a subtitle file to a YouTube video. That's what I would use. And then you can upload that file directly to YouTube and you can have subtitles on there. The other one is called tab delimited text. And so what that means is going to have the Tlingit right here, and then a tab, and then the English right here. And then the next line will be below it. And so when I enter that, both of these are checked. I usually have separate column for each tier. I don't have any of this other stuff sort of checked, but this is kind of sort of how I do. I don't include like the beginning time and the end time, but you could. Then if I hit OK, I pick a spot for this to be exported and I save it. And this is, I don't know what this is asking me. I always just say, okay. If you know more about this stuff, then go ahead and get fancy if you want to. Then when I go to where that folder was, so here is, where did I go? ʼaanyalahaash and ḳuwdlig, and I think it's this one. So when I open it, I know this is probably all very small, but then this is what you end up with. And so you can get it to here. And so what I would do from here is I would usually open it in a text editor, copy it. This is a bit much, maybe this. I'm not asking any of you to do any of this stuff, but I would open Microsoft Word. I would have a new document. I would select all, copy, paste, and now I can select all again, and I can say table, convert text to table. I select tabs and select OK, and now it's in these nice little tables. So if you want to get stuff ready for publishing, this is how you do. And then from here, you've got other, you can get into InDesign, other stuff like that. None of this is required for any of the stuff we're doing. But if this is something you decide to do, and I believe everybody who reached a high level of fluency, almost everybody, they did this work in ELAN. It's you and a speaker, and it's amazing stuff. It can be very frustrating. It can be discouraging at times, but like if you stick to it, and if you know that we're all here working together, you're okay, you're not alone. You will have opportunities to check in. There's no level of grade that's associated with it. Like if you do the thing as an A+, doesn't matter how many words you got, doesn't matter how accurate it was. All that matters is that you tried, because this is the process of like applying all the stuff that we're learning and then seeing what happens when you just sit down and listen to a speaker. Shashkwan, what's that mean?
I was just looking at the ELAN downloading page, and I was wondering if there was a specific one that we should download, because it looks like there are multiple options.
It depends on what kind of computer you have. Like if you're running Linux, then there is one for that. If you're running Windows, there's one for that. If you're running a Mac, it really depends on whether you have a Mac, like an older Mac that has an Intel processor, or the newer ones that have the Apple, what's called the M1 or the M2 chip that's coming out. So there is a specific one for that type of computer. And usually if you go up to your little Apple thing and you say about this Mac, it will tell you what kind of chip you have.
Oh, okay. And is there a way to find out which one goes to which chip you have?
Yeah, so for me, I have an Apple computer, and it does have the M chip. So I would select ELAN 6.8 M1. I don't know what the simple one does. I always just use the regular one right here. But if you have that M1 or M2 chip, then this is the one that you want to get. If you have any problems setting it up, reach out and I'm happy to hop on a call and troubleshoot. It is finicky at times.
I tried downloading that simple one. It doesn't work nearly as well as the regular one.
The simple one?
Yeah, I would recommend not using it.
Yeah, I don't think there's any benefit to it, but this is taxing work on your brain and also on your computer. So this program does give computers that I have a hard time sometimes. Like if you're dealing with a file that's like 30 minutes long, 40 minutes long, it can get kind of weird, but it's gotten better over time.
So is the expectation that we'll complete the transcription? And then if so, when should we, when will that need to be done?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's probably going to take us 3 weeks, I would guess. But my suggestion is try to get to 30 seconds by Monday. Let's check in and see how everybody's doing. Nobody panic, don't worry. Monday, we'll sort of see how it's going, and then we'll just set our expectation class to class. Basically, if we got to 30 seconds and that wasn't too hard, then we'll try to get to 1 minute and 30 seconds. But we also have like 2 days between a class and then 5 days between class, or however the math works. So like on the weekends, we'll have longer chunks to do. And then we'll also have time to check in and just say, like, if there's something that's really, don't be surprised if there's lots of stuff that's very difficult to get. But by doing this work, and what's funny is some of us, like, this is part of what I do on, like, as a job, is to do this type of work. And some of it is very challenging. Like, there's a Susie James recording that's 90 minutes long, and she tells like 14 stories, and she speaks so fast. And so there are 3 of us sitting there with microphones, and, you know, there's George and Marge, and we got headphones. I highly suggest headphones. I highly suggest like high quality headphones, whatever, comfort and sound. And then just listen to your body and listen to your brain, and take breaks when you need to. If your ears are getting sore, like, don't damage your ears or anything. And yeah, and just pace yourself. And, you know, this is where you get to go intellectually shake hands with the master speaker, which means you gotta go genius mode. And so it's very fun.
So I'm looking through some forums here on the language archive that does ELAN, and apparently no one has been able to figure out how to get it to run on a Chromebook, even if you like change the firmware to Linux.
Oh, you have a Chromebook?
Yeah.
Okay.
I might be able to borrow a laptop from the library. I had to do that my first year at university when I didn't have a Chromebook.
Okay.
But they're pretty iffy about letting you download things. So I'll see if I can get that done, and if I can get ELAN on one of those laptops.
Okay, if that doesn't work, let me know. We do have a kind of a student computer, but no one's used it in a couple of years, and so we could set it up in the language lab.
Yeah, when I had all those old laptops, they were awful. They like powered off when if you unplug them and stuff.
Oh, yeah. Shared computers usually get beat up pretty bad.
Yeah. For the class, I'm willing to go through it again.
Okay. Sheesh. Anything else? Okay, I'll put the links on our class webpage as well. And send me an email if you have any difficulties at all. Okay. Any language questions you've been thinking of? Anything on your mind?
Are we gonna go to pronouns?
Yes, yes. So we were doing pronouns on Monday. We'll probably do a little bit of that here, but also like so what I do like when we go through those, so a lot of the stuff is built on these slideshows, right? And so the way the slideshows are built is like I would make this table and then so I would make this table and then I would go through and create copies of them and delete everything on here, delete everything. And so I just keep making copies and then it creates a situation where it can sort of reveal the answers. But however far we get as a class, then I go ahead and create a copy of this slideshow and save it to our class webpage as a PDF. So you can always download those, review it. As we do some of these pronoun exercises, you could keep this open if you wanted to as a PDF, or you could take a screenshot, wherever you want to do. That way, when we get to this, if I say, well, how do you say they are good? Then you go back to here and you say, oh, that's a third person, they. There's nothing there because there's no subject marker. So then you could say, oh, it should be Tlein, and it is. Let's say Tlein.
Last week I said something about reading short stories. So I tried to figure out how to say that and link it.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, would it be Xóotsx X?
I would probably say ʻúsci shkalneek.
Ushki.
Because it sounds so cute then. ʻúsci shkalneek. What to? But yeah, you could also say ye Xóotsx shkalneek. That would also be a small story.
A question that I have is, what is the difference between a mode and a type of verb? And is the language exclusive? Like, do you always say mode when you're talking about a specific thing and you always say type when you're talking about another thing? I'm getting confused between.
Okay. Yes, and always ask those questions because we do a lot of terminology stuff. So let's take a look at this verb, which is for something to be bright or shiny, right? I was thinking of that crab in Moana, right? So you'd say so the verb mode is what's listed down here. And so this is what we say like imperfective, perfective, future. And we have these ways to talk about it. And we're not alone. Like English uses like past tense, present tense, simple, what's it called? Past perfective. English does say that. Which, what's the past perfective of got?
Has gotten.
Had gotten.
Had gotten, right? And I remember I was an English tutor and someone asked that and I said, oh, I think it'd be had gotten or have gotten, right? And then there was another English teacher there who just flat out refused. She's like, no, you can't say gotten. I was like, well, if it's a verb, you can. And so English uses those types of things, usually past, present, future. A lot of English speakers don't study this stuff at a real deep level. But if you look at other ʼatudli languages, like if you just really got into Tlingit grammar, and then you met someone who spoke Navajo or Gwich'in or Koyukon, and you start talking about perfective and stuff, they would probably, if they were also nerding out on the grammar of their language, they would be like, oh yeah, we have that. And they would operate in very similar ways. It's really, really fun. But when we talk about verb mode, we're saying this verb is being put into a mode to say is, isn't, was, wasn't, will be, won't. And there's about 20 major verb modes for Tlingit. And then that's when you get into like can't, do it, don't do it. All of those things are called a mode. And so that's what we usually say. In English, sometimes you call it a tense, right? Past tense, present tense. We don't really, time is not the driving logic in Tlingit. So we say the word mode to talk about changing the verb. When we say verb type, it's usually there's an act verb, an event verb, a state verb, a motion verb, and a position verb. Those are your 5 verb types in Tlingit. And what that says is it sort of gives you some information about state verbs usually have object pronouns only. Not all the time, but usually you say ʼatyake, ʼatliqe, ʼatlitzin. All of those are state verbs. State verbs also have an imperfective. They have an imperfective, and the imperfective will have a plus I classifier. They're the only verbs that have those 2 things. An act verb also has an imperfective, but it must be a minus I classifier. Instead of sh, you would have shla. Like for example, ashyech, which would be ashlayech. They are making it right now. So that's the difference between type and mode. And when you get into the conjugation section, which is coming next week, we're going to talk about verb modes a lot. But like my general strategy with this stuff is as we go back to this document. So here's your list of object pronouns, right? Like this list should be tattooed on your brain somewhere. And you should be able to recall it quickly. Like if I said, okay, so my verb is shkalneek, right? And I wanted to say, you are shiny. Shkalneek. But if I take shkalneek and put sha and ka in front of it, you're pretty. Shkalneek. Right? And so like this is ha shkalneek, chat shkalneek, yi shkalneek. What I'm trying to get us to be able to do is recall these very quickly so that it doesn't matter what verb we use. You should be able to plug that in there and recall it by saying, okay, it's a set of object pronouns. These are the blue ones. And so I need to grab from this list of blue ones. Then we talk about who's doing the verb. That's a list of red ones. And we're going to get to those ones. So my goal here, my approach to sort of teaching Tlingit grammar, which is a big sneaky monster, is to kind of go a little bit quickly through these sections. So like preverb, object, thematic, conjugation, subject, classifier, stem, suffix, postverb. Our extreme focus is probably on the prefix right now. And then we'll work on the stem. Because what it all comes down to is building a prefix and knowing what the stem is going to be. If you could do that, like you could use verbs in any way you want to. But it takes a while to unlock that. And so the way that I approach it is I don't expect you to fully understand what these things are. And I don't fully expect you to understand what every single one of these things are. But I want you to get an idea that they are there. And these are the things that are interacting with each other. And then we'll see, like when we get to this part, there are only 4 spots. And each of those spots, there's 1 thing there, 1 thing there, 3 things there, 2 things there. And what does that mean? It means it's like a wheel. And you can turn that wheel like a combination lock. And you can only have 1 thing on that wheel. But you put these things in a certain order. This one, ga. This one, and this one, ga. That gets you a future verb every single time. And every future verb needs to have that. And so that's when we talk about like how do you build these prefixes? For the verb mode, it's understanding that there's certain combinations of these things. And then we got to kind of talk about what they are. But then we got to kind of go in a bit of a hurry because we got to get to the classifier because all of those things interact with each other. But then once we start doing that, we'll look at some examples and say, let's just change the object and subject. We're not going to worry about all the other stuff in between. But then we'll say, okay, we need to learn how to build perfective verbs. So if you see any verb you can give me the perfective form of it. And you could do so with any subject. So I could say, you got it dirty. I got it dirty. They got it dirty. You broke it. I broke it. They broke it. You cleaned it. I cleaned it. They cleaned it. We'll be able to do that with a high degree of success, right? And a lot of it is guesswork at times. That's okay. Because as you're trying to sort of put these things together, but I think, and it's the reality is in 70 years, fewer than 10 people have probably learned how to fully speak the Tlingit language. We have to figure out how to unlock that thing. And I do think this is maybe the way. I don't know, maybe 30 years from now, there'll be something totally different. But after I learned how to speak Tlingit, then I kept just thinking, well, how do other people learn? And for me, it was a combination of talking to the old people who were around at the time, especially 10, 15 years ago, and talking to as many of them as I could, in Tlingit as much as I could. And then the other part was having conversations with people like James Crippen and Tim Hall and others who are really sort of ingesting the grammar of it so we can sort of figure out and bounce things off of each other. And Jeff Lear is really great at all of this stuff. So yeah. Other thoughts or questions? I know we're throwing a lot out there. Or observations. Okay.
So actually, never mind. So I see A going.
Okay. So let's step out of the grammar world a little bit. And let's this was something that I was kind of working on. I haven't quite figured it out yet. But what I was trying to get is a Google Sheet where if I hit the refresh button, it's going to show us a verb theme, in this case, ich, to call out, to shout, to holler. And then it's going to give us a mode. So the imperative, so the command form. And then in this case, this won't align. And so like this might say perfective and third person, right? Like I need this to get bigger. Oh, I guess. Okay. Anyways, so if I were to say the imperative form of this is na'ich, yell. That's how you would tell someone to shout. And so you can tell that by sort of looking here to see the conjugation type, and then you look back to see the classifier. And this is how I do it. I look here first, then I look here, then I come in here and I say, okay, it's got to stay high. Na'ich. And I could do this again. And now I got a different verb. And now my verb is hate. So a repetitive form, you regularly hate them. And that's not a nice thing to say. I realize that. But I would say K-ish-kanch. You hate them regularly. Okay. So, but this is something like I just keep thinking of, well, how do we, I know we were talking the other day about developing worksheets of commonly used verbs, and I am going to take that challenge, and I'm going to but for me, I think imperfective, perfective, future. Those are your primary, you need those to communicate. And so we're going to start there. So I know some of us want to do habitual and hortative and other, it's wild stuff and it's really fun, but we're going to stick to some of that stuff. But for now, let's do a couple sentences of our story. That's where we left off. We could see the translation on the right-hand side. Would anybody like to read this sentence?
Dukago kadach yach kao jachin shirkatwe klek kaajik du ʼu'anyalahaash.
Okay. So just sort of coming through, we might sort of say, here's a verb. And we might say, here's a verb. Right? And so both of these have a preverb. And so what that means is there's a word there that if you took that word away, it completely changes the meaning of that verb. So this yach as a low tone means to completion. This yach with a high tone means something different. Anybody know? Like, yes. So we have these similar but different things that pop up. So now I might say, okay, let's just go through this sentence and see what we recognize. Any words that you recognize?
táakwde klek.
Táakwde klek, was that what you said?
Ah,
How would we translate that?
Berries.
Alder berries or all the berries.
Berries. Okay, so we got the middle part.
Due to
Yachiti.
Yachiti. Due to Wooch Yachiti, her spirit was like fire or angry.
Yeah. On, underline and low is fire. On, no underline and high is anger. So, and there's different ways to say angry. It's really interesting. You could say chant uanuk, chant du tu yeyati, and in this case, chant du tu wu yachyati, or du tu wu chant yachyati. Her feelings were like anger, which is interesting. Okay. What about dukagu?
Her basket.
Yes. So we could probably guess what the last verb is. And then we got a couple other little particles to get to. So, ka, do we know ka?
Basket.
And
And
What about a jeet?
Jeet.
her hands,
her possession.
her possession, yeah.
But like that would be do.
Rubber.
It's not do.
A jeet. Due to Wooch Yachiti. Táakwde klek. Jeet.
and from her possession.
It's not hers because it's not do. So what we have
It's
here is a bit of a metaphorical construction. So if you have one verb and you say ajit, this thing that just was talked about is what caused the next thing. There's several different ways to do this, but you could say something and you could say, my work is terrible. And this is like a because of it thing, but it's like it has caused this thing to happen. There's several different ways to do it. There's slight differences between them, but ajit. So basically saying, I am angry from this thing.
Is kadach like over?
Kanach can be over.
Okay.
Kadach would be from the top of it. And this is another thing that gets, okay. This coffee is gucha toot because it cannot spill. But if I take this lid off, this is not gucha toot. This is gucha what? It's not gucha yik.
Shin, shin,
Gucha ka.
oh,
Okay, so these are like these little directional things get, like if I want to say pour some coffee in the cup, I'd say Ach gucha ka kasacha. Pour it in my cup. And then you say ka, which our English brain is like, no, that's on. But it's also an empty, it's a container that can spill, and Tlingit is on. Because it just comes down to how do you carry it. So kadach would be from, this is weird, her basket from in it. Even though it's ka. Because if there was a basket without a lid, and I was saying put it in the basket, I would say kakayente. That's just how Tlingit works. So that gets us to yach kaujichin. So I think we'll go to the dictionary. We'll open up the table of contents. We'll go to the Tlingit verb section. If it's kaujichin, what are we looking for?
Line X.
Kin.
Cheen.
Kin.
Just make it long and low, and let's go see if we can find it. It'd be nice if it had yach in front of it. That would really, so yach, ka, and it's got to have ka in front of it. And the classifier is probably going to be a D plus SH. So those are the things that we're looking for to see if we could spot our verb. So we're getting heat. Oh, here's yach, ha, D, S, H. There's our verb. It has everything we're looking for. And there's a yach kauchachin. It's spilled. So just for your information, Tlingit has this verb for things to spill, but it has a different verb root and everything for when somebody spills something. But we're not, just don't worry about it right now. So in this case, I guess in Tlingit, like it's a really big deal to spill something. Like, I got to make a whole verb because you spilled that, okay? They spill.
But in that verb theme, there's a SH included with the classifier, which makes me think of a reflexive verb, but that's not the case here.
Well, it's a plus, probably, right? Because things that spill, it affects them in such a way that if something gets really affected, where maybe its whole state changes, you might see a plus D classifier in there.
Okay.
It's spilled. You okay?
Could you also think of that like it spilled itself? And that kind of makes sense in my brain.
You could, yeah. And so like, but this is just saying like nobody made it happen. This is a very like, when we were using language a lot around little kids, it was very convenient to have something where it's nobody's fault. It just spilled. But yeah, you can get into, Wooch is going to be the other one. And so we see the examples here. So yach kauchachin yahin, the water spilled. The bucket didn't spill. But then we'll have a different verb, which is I think it's close by. I think it's ʼchich.
It doesn't matter if it's liquid or not liquid.
Nope. So yach, it still has yach in front of it. It has an object and a subject now. It still has ka, but it's a zero classifier. Kuchich akawa ʼchich. They spilled the rice. I spilled the contents of the dish. So now you get into like, you did it, they did it, I did it, those types of things. Okay. So I know that there were some questions about this story. And I want to keep talking about this story throughout the semester. I do believe that the Kalguantan claim this story. There is a Haida version of this story that is told almost identically. I think it's told in Koyakan as well. This version comes from the way it was told in Tlein. There are some specific things that are different in each version. It's very common in Tlingit to have stories that have little differences in between them. So sometimes people get upset if it's told in a different way. But I think if you analyze the stories, there's one storyteller might tell it different from another. But sometimes there are specific differences between the stories. So if you want to tell this story, Shaawát, it is told differently than the Ḳóotsx story, which is a man who ended up marrying a bear. That is, there's some points in that that are very different, including like how they found the person in the cave where the bear was, how they got them out of there, and then what ultimately happened. I do believe at the end of this story, spoiler alert, she kills her brother and then she takes off with her kids. Okay, the book is here in Juno. I'm in
But not in this
conversation.
version. That doesn't happen in this version, does it?
We'll find, stay tuned,
Well,
folks.
I mean, I've read it 4 times.
Shaawát.
Okay.
Well, I guess we're gonna do one more. We're gonna do one more sentence then.
Are
Trying to
we
get
missing the G in the English translation?
oh yeah, and from that. Right. And so what we're doing here as well is like if we were to publish the English, we might go through and make a few changes to it. And as you go forward, and if you do like publication and translation work, you will have big decisions to make in terms of what that final product looks like. We're not really in the business of creating a publishable translation. When we go through it like this, we're really just sort of saying, well, what is the Tlingit saying? And then we're moving on. Okay. Just to let the universe know, we do not believe these words. We are just quoting what she said when this happened. So anybody who reads it, you'll be safe.
Ḳunahéin? Llwysgi ʼatudli.átk Yede. Has Ḳuwdlig ʼéidáx.
Sheesh. Okay. What kinds of things do we recognize here?
Hagar, truly.
Uşk is bad or evil, so I suspect that might have something that might be similar. It's bad bear.
Brown bear.
I had it translated in my head as this bear is truly evil.
Yeah, right. And so it could be one, it could be multiple. In this context, she's condemning all of the bears. And so this is something, so ʼxuxik, which would actually be ʼxuxik. Well, you'd actually say ʼxuxk is how you would say that verb. But this is a process where a verb is becoming an adjective. So the short version is you add a low tone suffix to it. So for example, if you have tlitsin, you could say tlitsini. Noun, a strong noun. And if you say yak-a, you can say, oops. Now you could say yak-a-yi, noun, and it's a good noun. And this works really well for state verbs. Like we just saw bright. It's a bright light, right? Shiny. Okay. It's truly bad bears. This is a verb mode. Ģuāxkshé is the first part of it. And all the way at the end, you have a verb that looks like a prohibitive. in some ways. And so the fancy word for it is optative. So you're going to have this little underlined K at the end, which usually means don't. So I'd say, don't live there, right? That would be a prohibitive. But what we end up with is this, and even though it's in this kind of a funky form, those two things combine to say, I hope it is that way. Right? And we see this in early conversational stuff. Guash kshe ye wutik. This is in the beginning Tlingit workbook. Does anybody recognize this or know what it's saying?
Say it again, please.
I hope it is that way.
I hope it is that way. But it's a funky, it's one, now this is one of those, there's a bunch of stuff in Tlingit that falls in this category of like things we need to think about. Because some things, languages change. Every language changes. It's inevitable. If that language is alive and in use, it's going to change. However, there are some things that change that we want to sort of talk about and maybe prevent them from changing in a certain way, but also in a way that's just kind. We're not trying to tell people they're doing anything wrong. But a long time ago, the way people would say this would be Guash kshe Ǩuwdlig, which was like, I hope they live there. It's basically what we're getting at. Guash kshe. Oh, there's a mistake in here. I'm so sorry. There was a cut and paste mistake. Okay. ʼatudli. Guash kshe ʼatudli has Ǩuwdlig. What you might hear people say today, Guash kshe ʼatudli has Ǩuwdlig. They won't change this second verb to the way it's supposed to go. Doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means there's this extra thing that's sort of falling off a little bit. This is maybe similar to other, like these things kind of happen in English, but if you have like texted, and a lot of people are using text, or here's what I keep hearing. So do you like to say end quote or unquote? Does it matter? I feel like I'm hearing people say unquote at the end of they'll say, and then quote, to be or not to be, end quote. I thought it was end quote, but I'm hearing distinctly people saying unquote.
They're wrong.
I always say unquote.
And this is a similar conversation. Like there's some things, like if you say, if we're going from texted to text, oh yeah, I texted him the other day, right? Most people are not going to correct that. Like, it's actually texted, right? But other things maybe, right? And so these are conversations to have about Tlingit. Beth, what's up?
So you said that translates roughly to I hope it is that way. Is I built in there somewhere that I'm not seeing, or is that just kind of a loose interpretation?
Yeah, so it's Guash kshe is hopefully. So I guess maybe the literal translation is hopefully it's that way, instead of like specifically I hope.
Okay. But sheesh.
The she is I wish, and then you could have a relational form of the second verb. But yeah, that's a great point.
Just a quick one, Ḳuwdlig. Is there an aerialis in that optative, or I'm just thinking like I would say Xóotsx X.
Yes. Yes.
So
So yeah, you should have, I'll make a note over here. You should have aerialis. You should have -I classifier. Probably long and low. I'd have to check on the stem, but you're definitely going to have this underlined K. So ʼxóotsx X, I hope it's good. Xóotsx Xóotsx I hope you finish working on it. ELAN. But it's a complex, so what do we think this is saying now? It's ʼatudli. So sorry about that. I was building the, what do you call it? I was going through, and what I do with these stories, the analysis I do with these stories is I count every single word that's in there. So we'd have the most commonly used words and the most commonly used verbs. And then and then I create a glossary for the entire book. And so I'm at the glossary phase with this one. So just so we know, so we've got the ʼxóotsx X. Hopefully they reside. And now we get ʼatudli.
But my guess is that something to do with them like walking away, like going away.
Do we know what ʼatudli is?
I see that ʼagut is other or different.
Different.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
So ʼatudli has two different interpretations. A different place or a different way. What do you think this one is?
Different way.
Probably a different way.
Well, if you were talking about them living somewhere.
Different
It's a
place.
different place.
It's some kind of bird.
ʼatud, it's just different. There we go. Okay. So let's see. I'm trying to catch up on the text, sorry. Okay. Yes, so I'm trying to get the books in your hand. So Ḳuwdlig, ʼéidáx, and now Xóotsx X, Shaawát. Yeah, I don't want to say anything about how the process has been. It's been a little bit confusing in terms of how do I get, I had like 10 copies of Ḳuwdlig, 1 copy of ʼéidáx. And so we're trying to do it, and nobody's withholding anything. It's just it's a lot of work. It's a lot of moving pieces. So over the weekend, here's the thing. I want you to continue. I know we talked about having a sentence or some sort of response to this Tom Peters story. And so we have a few different moving pieces now. We have 2 different versions of a woman who married a bear. Right, which is actually the woman who said something to offend the bears, is what it translates to. We have this small version that we're going through and translating. We have the big version, which we're just listening to and thinking about, and that's our whole language component. And now we're introducing this other piece, which is the transcription and translation work. So what I would like to do is probably table the sentences that you're responding to, your response to ʼéidáx. We'll have a chance to do that before the end of the semester. But I want us to shift our focus to your work between classes is transcription and translation. So I want you to get to the 30 seconds into this ʼqaqit story. If you have any problems with ELAN, you could just do it in whatever program works for you. You could set up a table where you're putting English on one, or Tlingit on one side, English on the other. It doesn't matter to me how you do it. ELAN is just, it has some tools that I do think makes it easier, but sometimes getting the thing on your computer and getting it to work is tricky. Like I used to have to install these like Java script updates and stuff. It was really funky for a while. And I think it's better now. It's also like free software. So whoever's out there making this stuff. So I want you to focus on that, like just transcription, translation. And then I would also like you to make sure we're going to go over these chapters, So we haven't really talked about the thematic yet. We talked about the object a little bit, and we're going to keep doing some drills with object pronouns. But I'd also like you by Monday to have read about the preverb, the object, the thematic, and the conjugation. We need to get to these chapters. So the conjugation chapter is a little, so object's pretty, like, here's this list of things. Those are the only things that are there. The thematic, which we'll talk about on Monday, I'll go over it and we'll look at some examples. The big thing with a thematic is these are basically nouns that you could put onto a verb. You can have up to 4 of them, and they occur in a very specific order. This is spot number 1, spot number 2, spot number 3, spot number 4. Talk about what all that means. And then it shows you a bunch of examples, and it shows you the most common ones. And then when we get to conjugation, these are the spots that get activated when you start moving the verb mode around. Like when we were just talking about this, hopefully it's that way. Hopefully it happens, that type of thing. There are certain things that get activated right here. And it kind of really comes down to this list. Well, I'll show you the list on Monday, but just read through it, but also don't feel like you have to master all this stuff and we're moving on, because the grammar is a big piece of what we're doing. The listening to Tlingit, writing it down and translating it is a big part of what we're doing. And then writing sentences on your own and starting to use these verbs in more and more complex ways. But I got distracted by the shohei otan. I was like, shohei otan.
Yeah, how do you say he hit a home run? All I said was he ran home.
I guess you'd say, so what do they say? They hit it out of the park. ʼéidáx ish. He batted it out of the park.
ʼéidáx.
ish. So ish is to bat something.
Ish.
You can also say nachle ish. They kucheta. What's this ʼákwde?
Dodgers ʼatudli. Gach has. How do you say they will succeed? Let me get it. Dodgers, Ǩuwdlig, Dodgers, Ḥuwdlig.
Well, you'd say ḥuwdlig. ḥuwdlig, I think. But you also say ʼatudli, Ḥuwdlig.
Ḥuwdlig, Dodgers, Ḥuwdlig.
Okay. Ishan Mets. Okay. Have a great weekend. Sorry if you got any questions. Happy to clarify.
Cheese.
Yeah, I'll stay on for a minute.
All right, cool.
I have a question for you, Ḥune, a work question. Can I ask you that?
Do you want on the record, off the record?
It doesn't matter.